So, hello and welcome. Today we have only time for a short session, so I thought that some hypers might be interesting for you today. And welcome to this Poker Mania live stream today. Tonight we are only having our Unibet free roll going on. You unfortunately can't register anymore, but maybe after next week there's the public private coaching with the first Victor if he's free from work. So next week we are not going to have our session on or our sit and go or MTT session on Sunday because Ice Hockey World Championship will end and I'm a Finn, so Ice Hockey World Championship is more important than streaming. Sorry. So next week we don't have anything on Sunday, but we'll have it just the next day on Monday. And it might be that we are having a public private coaching with Danita. That was the best player out of the players that had made a Unibet account through us. So there is some free coaching upcoming from him. Or if his work is going to be in if he needs to work on that day, then we'll just try to do a regular session but only on Monday. And now I'm wondering that am I speaking alone? Can somebody correct me? In these games, actually, one thing that I think most people are making most mistakes in hypers is to when to shove and when to min raise. And I see many people that are starting these hypers. I see them raise like 3x the big blind because that's usually told in books that you should raise early on in a sit and go three times the big blind. But I think that's something that's not very useful. Like in these games, the early stages are practically removed from the game. And these hypers, these are starting with 20 big blinds, 25 big blinds. But as we are having pretty big antes right from the start, if we are looking at tournament adjusted big blinds, these start just around 16 tournament adjusted big blinds deep. So these games are going to be quick, and because there is no early phase, I'm usually saying that there is not a lot of if you are the first one to take part in the pot, usually there is not a usually your decision is you are either min raising or you are shoving, and then there are some middle ground that where you want to be limping because then you are making life harder for your opponents. But basically there is no spot like where you should open 3x early on. In here with two overcards and a flush draw, we are going for broke. And if we are getting the pot on the flop, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. So I'm trying to get some extra tables running so that we can get some of the late game. Like in hypers, this this early game, this is so similar to many of the sit and goes middle part of the game. So that's practically something that people are pretty well versed from other sit and goes. I think the situation in hypers that people are least aware would not be this early stage, but would be the late game, and especially with a really low stack size, because there will be no situations in the regular games, or there will be way less situations in the regular games where you will have a really short stack. In this spot, it's like this hand sucks. This hand so totally sucks. But when our opponent is opening 75% and he's opening for the small blind, so we can play in position, and it also means that his hand sucks as well. It doesn't mean, but it means that it's pretty likely. So I think that we can defend pretty widely there, and perhaps 8-4 off is a bit too wide, but I find that when there are so many people paying antes on the table, I find it really hard to fold on those situations against regs that are raising a large amount of time. In this situation, I'm thinking that should I turn my bottom pair into a bluff because the bottom pair is deuces, and I think that pretty much like every card will bring an overcard to my pair. So this is like this is not just regular bottom pair. This is a bad bottom pair, and I'd rather have like ace high in a situation, even though it's a worse hand, but it will have three outs to become something beautiful. And per deuces, it has two outs to grow into trips, but and also in these games that when we are having situations that all the player stack sizes are pretty low, then we'll need to know our push and call ranges against different opponents, and what happens when there are three people all in, what happens when there are two people already all in. In this case, I thought that with ace king suited, it's going to be a great hand, and I'm probably getting my money in better, or I'm getting more money in if I play it a bit more passively. And if there is going to be three players all in, I'm going to do a hero fold here. But when this guy is a limper, well, he might have aces, but I think it's still quite likely that he doesn't have aces. So this is one of the reasons that these games are going to be good. There are still players that are like, probably if you are thinking about that hand, that if you are limp and calling a shove with queen 9 suited, it's probably going to be quite close to being the worst possible play that you can have on that hand. I think on pocket threes we are getting a bit more fold equity about when we are over four big blinds deep by shoving, but if I would have something like 240 chips, I think that we get more fold equity by min raising. But it's going to be close even with the four big blinds, I think. And I didn't move this table out instantly because it's going to be the last table because we were eliminated from the table that was there before. And yeah, that's going to be a good question. That is the stream working well for anyone, because we haven't had that much chat or anything. So okay, Kauri says that it works well. That's good. And like you see in these games, that there will be a few guys, like every game that is going to open, I'm seeing pretty much the same three players are registered to every game, like Poku87, Gimbo Wild. And that's something that you'll need to expect, that there will be a few guys that are going to be pretty much on every game you will play. So the good point in that is that you will get decent data on your opponents pretty quickly. In here, when we are having suited hand that it's even somewhat connected, it becomes really tempting when we are getting close to 1 to 7 pot odds there. Ace 5 off is going to be a pretty standard shove over a small raise. And with 10-7 suited, when we don't hit anything, so we don't hit a solid draw or anything, then we are going to just check fold. And in here, when this opponent limps, I'm thinking that he's having a medium to trappy range. And I check 8 suited because we are going to hit some solid flops, but on that flop with just an inside gotcha straight draw, it's not going to be worth it. And because of the antes, we can shove somewhat wider in most situations than we would without antes. And now it's actually been pretty interesting. I think the hyper players are having somewhat of a leg up on other players. In here, king 10 off might seem that it's not going to be that good of a call, but I think in those situations when we are against a reg will have on those situations that the blinds will hit him really hard on the next hand. He will have a wider range, and I think king 10 off is going to be a solid call there. I think a reg is generally shoving pretty wide in here because he's folding equity. If blinds go over him again, his folding equity is pretty much gone. So and that's something that in hypers that you'll want to always take care of. So you'll always wanna see that your stack can be used as a weapon. So when your stack size dwindles and there is like no other opponent that you are fighting to get in the money, so then you are going to have to take risks. And this is going to be actually quite close. I think that it's going to be a fold. And if I would have played that, it would be a min raise. Because then also, if we have two players all in on that hand, then we can still fold. So the bubble effect in 9 max sit and goes, it's going to be really important. And the bubble effect, like if we are thinking about the 9 max sit and goes, like the prize pool is that the first person or the first prize is 50% of the prize pool, the second prize is 30% of the prize pool, and the third prize is 20% of the prize pool. So everyone in top 3 is getting at least 20%. So I think in essence we can say that 60% of the prize pool will be divided at that point. So it's in 9 max sit and goes, it's going to be really important to get in the money. And king 5 off, 3-handed is not going to be good enough, but against those kind of players that we are having, like the opponent, the Gimbo Wild, against those kind of players we wanna call pretty wide because we can see that he's going to shove pretty close to any two cards on the small blind on the later stages. So it's going to be player dependent. There's always going to be adjusting to the opponents in every game. And if you are having any questions or comments, just chip the comments via chat. And today I unfortunately forgot to open the Twitch chat, sorry. And it's a bit too hectic now to open it, so probably if there is a comment on Twitch chat, if someone is watching the Twitch chat, please just follow up on the messages here as well. In here, we have an opponent that shoves for 5 big blinds, and we are getting pretty close to like 33% equity. Like we are like 36% ish, just by the chip odds. And I think with King 10 suited, we are going to, like, if we are requiring about 36% by just chip odds, the antes will add up to, or not antes, but the ICM effect will be something like 4 to 5% on that spot. And I think that even against a tight range, we are going to get, like, on that hand, we got 41%, and I think that's quite representative that what's going to be about the least that we are going to get against an opponent. Top right, King 5. Can't find the hand anymore. I can check some hands on the end of the session, but and in these situations, this is also going to be important. Like before this, we have pretty much talked just about the folding part, that we'll need to be careful with that we don't do stupid calls. But if we are having regs, and if we are having players that are understanding the same basic principles than we are, they don't want to get eliminated fourth. And they are going to have like really strong aversion of getting eliminated fourth. And because they are having this aversion, it becomes really good for us when we are having even a little bit larger stacks, so we can threaten elimination against these guys, these small stacks. It's going to be really good to shove over them, and actually, like, this guy is having the perfect opportunity to shove, like, the as a mid stack in this game. I'm going to have the worst situation for me. Like, I can't call the largest stack with pretty much anything. And when I can't call the biggest stack with pretty much anything, it also means that if I can't call them, and in this situation it's going to be like LA Roosman should shove, and he will shove with any 2 cards, because he's one of the best regs in these games, and this is like the perfect situation that there's 2 mid stacks and there's 1 really small stack. So this is going to be the perfect situation to abuse the bubble. And very good regs in these games don't miss those opportunities to abuse the bubble. This is something that, even though we are going to gain equity in a vacuum by shoving the Jack-7 suited here, I think we are gaining more equity if we are making these 2 opponents collide pretty much 100% of the time. Like, this is something that, because these opponents are going to be colliding 100% of the time, it's going to be worth more for us to have them collide than even shove. Like, we are going to be slightly ahead with Jack-7 suited against a completely random range, and there will be enough from the antes and blinds. But the situation, like, in those situations, it's going to be, I think it's going to be a pretty interesting situation. All in all, because on those situations it's going to be, and usually if there is a surefire collision, it's going to be an easy situation. But if you are looking at some hands with something like a Hold'em Resources calculator or something, And those are situations that you'll also need to adjust your. Those are situations that you'll also need to adjust your small blind to big blind. Small blind against big blind ranges. I'm going to actually try that. Can I find the king 5 suited that Danita asked about? I'm thinking that this might even be the last game for today's session, so it's going to be pretty. Now we'll open a few more. Mm. With all the money already in the pot, like we are requiring to have about 40% equity here. Do we get about 40% equity here? Yeah, we do. I think it's going to be that an unknown opponent will also shove a bit wider when there is a call. I don't think that in those situations that when there is a limp, there's a sizable raise compared to the stack sizes, and that this king nine off, this actually should have been a shove. So this is a clear cut mistake on my part for not shoving this. Mm, I think I found the hand that Danita asked about, so I'll mark it, and then we'll have at least something to discuss. In these games, it's going to be also pretty important that you learn to how to analyze these games later on and how to analyze your situation, like what kind of situation you are in these games. Like sit and goes, these games are not about getting good cards. These games are not about just value betting your good hands. These games are all about playing the situation. Like you need to understand what the situation is. What are the motivations for all the people in the pot right now? And like how much pressure can you inflict on your opponents? How much your opponents are going to understand that how much your opponents are going to understand about pressure, and these games are going to like these are basically a range versus range games. And what because these games can be in such variety of situations, it's going to be pretty hard to learn ranges on every situation, every different situation that arises. So you need to know about what's the basic range in a certain kind of situation, and how the situation changes, and what should it are, and how it affects your ranges there. mm, I think in this hand we are getting a slightly better equity if we can get this guy to fold. So so this was something that even if this guy would have shoved, it would be an easy fold. So that's something I think that's going to be quite standard. And in this case, if Boku is not going to get in the pot, I think King Jack suited is going to block enough of our opponent's good hands, and like Ace 9 suited is going to be something that in three-handed, when he's the second stack and there's a very small stack on the table, I think it's going to be. I think the King 9 suited is going to be. Or Ace 9 suited is going to be pretty horrible call there. I'm trying to get more tables, but none are starting right now. And it makes the situation a lot more like in this situation, we need to know that this guy, he probably doesn't understand ICM enough. So if he's having a pretty hand, he's pretty much going to call, even though it isn't sensible for his equity. And I think ace-3 off is going to be too strong hand to fold here. And when our opponent limp calls with pocket fours, that's going to be the most horrible situation for us. And for pocket fours, I'm thinking that that's going to be about the. I'm thinking that that's probably one of the biggest mistakes to just limp with the pocket fours, because with all of my weaker hands, even if I'm having something crappy like 9-5 off, I can I can realize a lot of my equity with the really crappy hands against pocket fours. And also with pocket fours, even if he's limping and then I start bluffing on the flop or the turn, it's going to be pretty hard for him to call one or two barrels of bluffs there. So actually, it's probably just one barrel of bluff, because we were so much ahead of Boku 87 on that table. But that's something like with pocket fours, we should because of the situation that he will have a really easy profitable shove there. Like the shove is really profitable for our opponent, and limp is going to be easily a situation that's going to be a really hard situation to play profitably. I don't expect to see like something like pocket fours ever there. Like out of pocket pairs that someone limps, I can expect to see like pocket jacks plus some time, and it's going to be to exploit the exploit people that are shoving wide over limpers. But something as weak as pocket fours, I never expect on those situations, and I really, really, really rarely see that. He didn't bet the flop, he started betting on the turn. 6 is a pretty bad card for us, but I think it's going to be a call still. Yeah, we both had sevens, but I had the better kicker. And basically in these games, that as long as I don't have data on my opponent to do something, I'm going to treat my opponent just like an average opponent. When I'm having something like 30 hands, and if I'm seeing after something like 30 hands that my opponent is playing like every hand and limping almost all of his hands, then I will know something. And if I see like, let's say 300 or more hands than my opponent has played pretty solidly, then I'll know something else about my opponent, and then I'm starting like applying the general reg ranges in the situation. Pocket 6 is basically, it's a hand that plays pretty well, but when we have an UTG open for 3x, I don't think it's going to be profitable. Queen 7 suited, this is a situation play. And this is something that, even though I don't have hands on Anssi Juhani, I have seen Deja playing these same games or $15 games, and I think that he's a reg. So this is also something that, like, players are not completely unknown to you. You might remember their names. You might remember that, hey, this guy frequents the same forum that I go on to sometimes. And if a player is a forum player, or if you remember some player from something like Sharkscope leaderboards, then you don't need the 300 hands to find out, like, hey, this guy is a reg. Of course not, because then you'll have some extra information also beforehand. And this is going to be an interesting situation, because we are having about the same stack sizes. So this is going to be in a sense, this is going to be about balls. And why this is going to be about balls. It's going to be that these situations are going to be pretty hard for our opponents to call, and if we can gain up on our opponent that we would be the largest stack on the table, it would be really good for our, and as long as this absurdo guy doesn't call, these guys would need to have a really tight range to call us. So even though this might look pretty stupid, that hey, that guy is pretty stupid, that on the bubble he's risking it all with the 9 high, but there is a method to the madness. And there is also a method to the madness that, wow, this guy is raising like 9 high and risking all his chips on the bubble. And then when there is an opponent that shoves pretty much any 2 cards thus far and is likely a reg, so he knows how much pressure he can inflict. And then we are folding ace-6 suited. Like, that doesn't make any sense, but this is a situation that I think that we are going to require something like 60% of equity to get the money in. So when we are requiring such a huge amount of equity, then we'll pretty much know that like we are never going to get it with ace-6 suited, even if our opponent is playing with any 2 cards. So, and this is going to be harder because this absurdo guy is getting a bit shorter, so he's getting more and more desperate. And also this guy is not a reg, so I would have folded it anyway. And I'm rather shoving when a reg is on the big blind because the regs know how tight they need to be on these situations than when a random player is on the big blind. Then I'm generally a bit more cautious because like what's my mental model of a random player, like a player that I don't know, that I don't have any information on him. So on those kind of players, I'm thinking that they are likely going to be calling too wide, and when they are likely calling too wide, it's going to make my range tighten up a bit. But when they are in the small blind, they don't find nearly as much reason to call. But when they're in the big blind, it usually is the easiest spot to call. And usually the big blind, when you are thinking about shove or fold and how much fold equity do you have, usually the big blind is the most important player in the hand. And I think when we are three-handed, it's going ace-6 off is going to be a solid call, even though on the bubble ace-6 suited was not. We can actually check it, because I think there have been some really really good hands on the bubble mathematics. And I have probably missed a ton of hands on the other tables. I hope that I haven't talked about hands that are on the tables that we are not taking actively part in on the screen. I know that I have done it sometimes on stream, that I have talked about a table that wasn't visible on the screen. It feels quite stupid when you realize what you are doing, but oh well, things happen. This is going to actually be really interesting, and this is going to also be a really interesting hand because our opponent limps there. And what does that make when also Anssi-Juhani limps behind? It's going to make a really interesting situation that if we shove, we are going to get against this guy, and this player needs to fold every hand as long as this guy is not in the hand. And when this guy needs to fold, we are going to get a situation that we'll pretty much play to triple up with a hand. And I think when we are playing to triple up against the short stack, I think on those situations we are playing to triple up against the short stack, and I think our hand's equity will be enough on that situation. When I'm having two players that are random next to me and this guy has limped a lot previously, I'm playing really exploitatively with the highest pocket pairs. Like if there two of those players would have been regs or players that I think that will be regs, I would play just shove it. It's going to be easy and then I'm not going to be leaking information. But when I'm having a random player, it's going to be that there is going to be like no style points in poker. It's it's not like boxing that there is like the style point judge in the corner like, hmm, that seemed to connect. And what a gentlemanly punch that was. No, in poker it's all about using whatever ever is permitted in the rules and trying to gain an advantage on that, and there is like no style points. You don't get any points that you play in a play style that's entertaining for the rest of the players on the table. Or usually you should be usually you should avoid something that will on the long term make games worse. Like even if it might make sense to berate someone on the table to make him tilt, it's a short term solution, and on the long term it will make the tables less fun place to be. And in these games it's going to be about entertainment. But so practically the money for the pros or for the better players is coming from the players that are there to have fun. So in a sense it's going to be entertainment is going to be not entertainment is going to be important, but I think that you should never lose EV. You shouldn't trade your playing style shouldn't change. It's rather that you are not slow rolling people and you are not berating people, but when you are playing your hands, you are always playing for them for the highest equity, and you are not playing that you are gaining approval with your style, because approval with your style it's not part of the points calculation for poker. Oh, how nerdy that sounded. And I think that there are plenty of players that are probably doing a mistake on their games, that they're thinking about style points when they should only be thinking about equity. In this situation, when we are having an opponent here, we are only checking even though our hand is clearly good enough to go all in. But we are not going to have fold equity pre-flop. But as you saw in this case, this guy on the table, like on the top left table, when I made the decision point to be on the flop, even though I had only 1/3 of the pot left, I could make my opponent fold on the flop. And pre-flop it would be like easy situation, like every player has pretty much trained to do the same situation that you are going to encounter on pretty much every single game. But when there is something different, it's going to be like it's going to, and especially if it's something that you have worked with and you know the equities, it's going to also gain an advantage for you, that if there is something that you have worked on, but like if your opponent just knows about shove or fold, even though he would be really good in shove or fold, if you are taking him to a part of the game that he's not that good at, like if you are doing a lot of min raising and limping against such a player, they might not be, or they might not play that well against well against a different strategy, even if they would know completely another strategy. In here, actually, when the opponent has raised, probably check calling would be a lot better with a 9 here. I still think that it's going to be that our opponent will have a worse hand than a 10 or a 9 some part of the time. And when he bets so small on the river, it smells a bit fishy. But we are getting such a great equity. We need to be right like 1 in 6. Trying to fit all the tables in, but it didn't matter that much. And this is going to be the last table, and then we are going to take a look at some of the hands we have. We have marked. So this has been a really quick session. Right now it's about 45 minutes long, but we are going to look through some hands. And we lucked out quite a bit, and this is a really important luck box situation in here, because now we can abuse the bubble to the fullest extent. So now the situation gets to be really good for us, and this is probably the situation that we can gain the most equity in when we are having the largest stack on the bubble. And it's going to be also a bit like, it's going to be a bit hard for you that if you are not getting these huge stacks near the bubble, it's going to take an effect on how much you can win in these games. So it's practically the same on every sit and go, that if you are not gaining the big pots early on, then you are also not getting the best situations where you can grow your equity. Queen 3 off. I think that the 3 is going to be too weak. Something like Queen 6 off I would have shoved, and this is because I think that we are getting called from Boku like close to 50 or 60% of the time. And Corpistori, hello, what do you think about Boku? Is he one of the best or not? I don't mind that much having him on the tables, but he's probably, if we are finding this player, we are probably finding that he's playing like 40 tables at the same time. So I'm giving mad props to him on. I'm giving him mad props on how many tables he's playing, and I think he's playing with quite a simple and effective strategy. So it's probably, if you are watching the Boku strategy, it's probably going to be one of the easiest strategies to learn. Like the strategies, I think it's going to be pretty simple, but I'm thinking that he's not going to be among the best players in ROI. I don't know how to put this. I think that he might be one of the best players in these tables, or like in these levels, like 7s to 15s. I don't know if he plays any higher. I don't remember seeing him anytime anywhere higher. So I'm thinking that he's likely one of the players that is having one of the best hourlies, but he's not likely to be the one of those players that having one of the best ROIs. I don't know. Did I explain it? Did I explain it well? But that's what I think. It's going to be an easy call no matter what, and we are actually getting it in way better than we would deserve. Like, I think that I haven't seen I think I haven't seen like Boku. I don't think I have seen him limp ever. I don't think that he min raises that much outside the first blind level. I think he's making some mistakes on situations that you could like min raise or just limp in the pot, and there's so little left to play. And I find that he probably makes it to play a crap ton of tables a bit easier. So, and as I said, that it might make a lot of sense for the hourly, and I think that's going to be something that in poker it usually gets no respect. Like if there are two players, let's say that there is a one player that can do 8% ROI in some game, not these hypers though, but let's say there is a player that can do 8% ROI in a game, and he can play, let's say he can play 6 tables at once. And then there's another player that plays the same games, but he can only get 4% ROI. So, like, he's worse in the actual game, but if he's playing 12 tables at once, during a single hour, they are making exactly the same amount of profit from the tables alone. And if we are counting rakeback and rewards and stuff like that, the player that plays 12 tables with 4% ROI is probably making a whole lot of money per hour doing. This is going to be a slightly interesting situation. I think in here we can limp because we are not going to fold a lot of equity away. This is probably going to be among the edge that I think against the general population in these games. Like this is not a Nash shove, so if our opponent calls perfect Nash, then Queen Deuce off is going to be a bad shove. But I think in these situations that our opponents are not calling perfect Nash, and I think it's going to be really close to break even. But I think in these games we are getting some edge by limping it. Like we are, I think that people are folding too much on the flop anyways, and I think that there is edge to be had on that spot, even though it's not going to be a profitable shove and we are just having something like 8 big blinds. And King 7 off is going to be a good shove. It's something that I think against what people generally call in these games, it's going to be a pretty great shove. It has been a bit sucky in this heads up match that our opponent has had a pretty great hand every time we have gotten it all in, and we haven't had the top of the range hands when our opponent have been shoving before that. But let's take a small look. Like when we are taking a look on some hands on Hold'em Resources Calculator, we always need to close our poker tracker. Okay, it was a nice session for, like we played something like 45 minutes, and on average we played for like 5 tables, and we got 16 games. So in these hypers, you can, even though you are playing just 4 tables, you can get quite decent sets still on how many games you'll get. And we got probably a bit lucky in the games, but win is a win. So let's try to get the hands as well. What are the marked hands from today? Let's see, there's the king 5 off, and this is going to be one of those situations that what we are going to do against our opponent, like we are three-handed, our opponent is going to he's going to probably shove pretty much any two cards here. He's a reg and he's an aggressive reg, so let's go take a look on that hand, and I think that the reg is going to shove more than Nash is going to be there. And actually, if reg will shove more than Nash will be there, it's going to be king 5 off is going to be pretty damn great call here. So I probably overestimated the amount of ICM effect we are having still in this situation. So that was actually quite a huge mistake. And this is about UTG shoving with a wide range. Let's see that are we even close to that we should call it with king 10 off. And in here, when we are looking at the future game simulation, we can get a decently wide range on Boku. I think that it might still be a bit too narrow. I think it will be closer to 50% because of the stack situation on the table. And if we are looking at this situation on our part, even the king 9 off is going to be solid, and king 10 off will be very solid call, even against the 34% range, and a reg will shove more here, so I'm really happy about the call with king 10 off. And let's see about, there's the king jack suited, there's an opponent that raised, and in this hand we are not that curious about our own hand. We are more curious about the hand that our opponent has. So let's take a look. And now it's actually interesting to see because Hodder Resources Calculator has had this new system of inputting hands for the advanced hand. And in here we can have like multiple different bet sizes. We can have like 2.5 BBs all in, and then it calculates like for every step for the every type of calculation if you want to look for multiple bet sizes, or you would want to look for multiple different 3-betting sizes, you can do it here. So it's going to be, and also empty fields default to all in only, so this is pretty redundant, but I found it useful. And in this case, we are not actually that curious about our opponent. Let's lock our own range, and actually we don't need to even lock our own range, because I think that all of the hands that our opponent should call with should be in his min-raise range in this situation. And he called with ace-9 suited, and if I'm shoving 39%, ace-9 suited is going to be minus 0.79% of the prize pool. And the prize pool in this point, it's going to be quite a sizable amount. So let's try to edit the range to be a bit farther. So we would need to be shoving about 60% in a situation that we are the biggest stack against our opponent. And I don't say that we are not shoving. We are not shoving against a random player, and of course, or in a sense, we are not shoving against a reg, because a reg will likely know that we are. Will likely know the situation he's putting himself into if he min-raise opens. So in this situation, I think that it's going to be good for us to raise, and there is going to be a lot of hands that we can raise profitably. I wouldn't be shoving something like Queen Deuce suited or Jack 6 suited here. I think that there will be also hands like something like Queen 9 suited, even if when it's like 0.21 profitable if we are shoving it, but I think it might be even more profitable if we are flat calling it. Something also with Jack 9 suited, 10 9 suited, Jack 8 suited, 10 8 suited. Hands like those that are going to play well on flops and are not going to get dominated by the opening range of our opponent that often. Let's get to the next hand. This is going to be like 3 equal stacks, ace 6 off. Should I call or not? Does the chat find the answer before I do? Ace 6 off is going to be profitable even against 64%, and I think general opponent will shove a bit more there. So ace 6 off is going to be a really good call. And then there's the ace 6 suited, and this is going to be a situation that, in my opinion, we are going to have way bigger ICM requirement. Like in this hand, even if Anssi shoves any 2 cards, like he should, and if he's a reg, I hope he will. It's going to be a situation that ace 6 suited is not going to be profitable. But on the next hand, like in this case, it's going to make a world of difference if we are 4-handed, so we are in the bubble, or if we are 3-handed, so we are like, if we are on the bubble, we are playing for 20% equity. But when we are 3-handed, if we are just playing to ladder up the one stage in the prize pools, it's going to bring us only 10%. So it's not going to be, when we are 3-handed, the survival is not going to be that important. But it's going to be way more important to gain more chips there, because when we are getting to heads up, we are seeing another like 20% price pool jump that's going to be even more important to be in good spot in that moment. So I think this concludes it. I hope. If you have any questions or wishes, there is a forum thread that you can post your questions or wishes for these coachings. And there will be some wishes that, like MTTs, that I just haven't had time to do a long session in a long while, so that's why we haven't done MTTs. We will do some MTTs later on. And of course, next Sunday we are not going to have an English poker night. So, and I'll need to even check, because there's the Ice Hockey World Championships, and as we are a Finnish poker forum and Finland is an ice hockey crazy country, I'll always need to check that what do we have next week. So next week our only English item on our menu is going to be Wednesday's Kyberis Spot Limit Omaha. But the week after that, it's going to be a lot more awesome with... It should have 4 English poker nights, so it's going to be good. If you liked what you've seen here, please subscribe to us on Twitch or YouTube, and please register to our own forum so that we can get even more of a discussion flowing on. So thanks everybody that listened and chatted today. It's always a bit easier when you are having questions and comments. And I think now it's time to end. If you are still playing, or if you are going to sleep, well, have a good night. If you are still playing poker, may this be a winning night for you. Bye!